Hello, my name is Jeff Jamiolo, and today I'm going to talk about the universal laws, cycles, but it's actually an example about business. Just a reminder, the universal law of cycles states that cycles will keep repeating until you change something. Ironically, as much as it happens for people, it's a universal law. It happens to everything, including industries and business. This is a kind of a small geeky story, but hopefully you follow it. I used to work for a company called Westinghouse. Westinghouse made all kinds of things, everything from file cabinets. The division I was with was in Buffalo, and I actually worked with power electronics. And the power electronics was literally, if you think of a small yellow school bus, take the wheels off and you park it in a side of a building. That's a transformer, and that's actually what we used to make. Our specific one, we made them for mining, oddly enough. I guess someone found out that it's economical to pump electricity through a rock, and if there's any metal in it, it explodes. So it's cheaper to mine than it is to use probably a pick or water method to get the ore out of it. Anyway, that was primarily our business. That business was there a long time. Westinghouse has been around for like ever. Well, it wasn't surprising that back in the 60s when computers started coming out, the mainframes, Westinghouse went and snagged one up. Like, oh yeah, we want one of those. And those are multi-million-dollar units. And problem is they're so expensive, they shared it among all their divisions. So our division, kind of shared it too. What's ironically funny is literally, as much as people think it's an asset, actually, I think it's actually a boat anchor is what it is, because you're kind of like a slave to this thing, and it's hard to find resources. You have to remember, look at the dates I'm talking about here, 1960s. Now, just a fresh reminder, there was in the year 2000, they call it the Y2K bug, and basically involves COBOL, what the mainframes ran off of. And COBOL stands for Common Business Oriented Language. And it's spelled C as in Charlie, O as in Oscar, B as in boy, O as in Oscar, L as in Larry. But basically the gist of it was everything in the computer was represented by only 2 years, 2 digits of a year. So, 1995 was represented as 95. And the problem was when we went to the year 2000, it would now be 0. And any comparison you did against an older date, 99, would be incorrect. It would say that the 2000 date was less than the 99 date. A lot of problems, supposedly, But that was the Y2K bug. They flushed a whole bunch of people into the system. Anyone who could program was there. And as I said, they were making decent money. They're making $60,000, $70,000 a year to fix this bug, and almost every company had to get them. So there was a lot of competition. What's ironically funny is what brought all this on is you have to remember that's the 2000s now at this point. So you're looking at the 2000s. They had this bug problem, and today there's still a shortage at this point, and they're declaring an official shortage that they're running out of people that'll actually work on COBOL programs anymore. And I kind of laughed. I go, this is 2025, so this is 25 years after those people for the Y2K people. I go, so essentially, you lost another generation of programmers that said, heck no, I'm out of here. And the cycle that I do believe they're in is they don't pay a lot of money. They probably still pay $60,000. And their answer is, as long as I can get people, why should I fix it? Why should we move to something else when we can still get this? And the problem is they're not really thinking it through that, you are dealing with literally a technology that's 60 plus years old. As I said, it's just, there's places for you to go. You just don't want to spend any money to get there because, I got to spend all this labor for these people to maintain my stuff. I go, well, I didn't tell you to be a slave to a multi-million-dollar piece of equipment. Most companies that could actually did get away from it and went to either the cloud or they went and hosted their own. It's a different mechanism versus that. Regardless, today there's still a shortage. The funny part is they're still not paying a lot of money either. So it's like you didn't learn your lesson. Because you would think that if you had a shortage, okay, you would go over and say, okay, instead of spending $60,000 or $70,000, I'm going to spend $150,000. But I'm going to get some people with talent at that point. Let's fix this problem. But they don't get these people. It's like, oh, what's the least amount of money I can spend? But I'll guarantee officers at a company actually make a lot of money. And like I said, a lot of it's banks, a lot of it's government, oddly enough. Most businesses, per se, unless they're regulated, most unregulated businesses do not use COBOL in any way. Usually it's the old stuff that's been around forever. IRS, they use it. Almost all the federal government uses it. And I said, that's the problem. It's like no one wants to fix any of this stuff anymore. And we just keep dealing with garbage all the time because no one wants to break the cycle. Now, my story, how I fit into this. In the year, I believe it's 1998, I was actually brought onto the Westinghouse group while they were doing this conversion. When the division was sold off, well, let me backtrack a little bit. Westinghouse closed my division before I even worked there. They closed it down for a number of years, and some venture capitalists decided they wanted to buy the business from CBS. So they bought the business, and literally when they bought the business, they realized, they started looking at some of the bills, and they realized the cost per month was $10,000 per month for communications between Buffalo and Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, because we had to have a lease line because of the mainframe they had there. We leased a mainframe from there, so we shared. So they got the idea. Okay, how about we entertain some a different way of thinking about this? How about if we took it and took that functionality that we did on the mainframe and put it in a PC, actually in the office, like on site. So they tasked a group, if I remember correctly, it was the Computer Task Group, is the name of the group that did the conversion. They did it, it worked fine. And I was actually brought in 1998 to manage after the fact. And I was hired because I knew of COBOL. I was working on it years ago, okay, and I pretty much was young. I was like 28 years old, and I knew what COBOL was, and that's considered a plus in the industry, because the next person above me, that knew about it in the company was 60-some years old. So it's crazy. But during this conversion, they're doing this conversion, we found some interesting things. At one time, we look at things, and things just for some reason don't seem right to you. Like, we print out a report, it's yay thick, and we look at it and go, oh, it's not sorted right. Oh my God. I go, we screwed it up. We fix it. So now, instead of the report being 2 inches, in thickness, it's actually a 1/4 inch, because we sorted it wrong. We sorted on a bad character, like in the middle of a number instead of the beginning of the number. And it's really what happened. And what would happen is whenever it would print out a page, it says, well, this one is greater than this one, so it would print one item on a page, then eject the page and print another two, and then print another one, and then two, whatever. It seems kind of random. But what it was doing is just wasting paper. So we were like, oh, okay. So we fixed it, and we went to go take the report to the actual people who use it. And said, yeah, here it is. We found a problem. We had to fix it. And we hand him the report. He goes, oh, that's not the report. And he pulls out from the mainframe the same 2-inch one that they used to get from the mainframe. This is the one we used to get. And I laughed at him. I said, did you ever try to use it? I go, it's not usable. It's just not sorted right. Oh, well, maybe. And it was an inventory report, so literally they had a 1/4 inch worth of inventory. So actually I laughed at it, because when he did look at it, I go, oh yeah, it does look kind of right. Like, for some reason, Westinghouse was very fond of wood chipping a whole wood rainforest at a time. They used to print a lot. Oddly enough, other thing we found out in the conversion is no one actually reads their reports. Randomly throughout the week, I would accidentally forget to print reports and see who complains. The record was someone actually after 3 months finally did complain, so I did actually have to make a report for them. But a lot of them, they didn't complain, so they didn't get them. One of the more interesting thing is our accounting people needed a full detail of something for the auditors. And literally he would, on a Friday, he would set his printer up and put a fresh thing of paper and go home for the weekend and come back, and Monday it was still printing on a dot matrix printer. It was still printing. It's like, oh, goodness gracious. Oddly enough, that's about the funniest thing about that is at the same time, Adobe came up with a new product. It was the Adobe Acrobat, but it was the writer, where it can pretend it's a printer and it'll print it to an Adobe file. So we purchased that for a whole $200, $299, installed that on his machine, and literally he printed to that, and he thought something was wrong because literally less than 10 seconds, was it not 10 seconds, about 10 minutes it was done printing. He looked at the document, oh my God, it's like 8,000 pages. Because that's about how many I used to print. So instead, he just emailed auditor, here's your report, instead of sending it to him in a box. So little quirky things like that. But as I said, there's a whole bunch of weirdness that actually happens in the day. What's ironically funny is that during the Y2K, that I was assured that when they did the conversion, everything was correct. But literally 6 months before, we ran a job and it exploded. Boom. Y2K bug. And in a way, it was actually a good time for it to happen because it wasn't mission critical. You were doing a future date from where you were. And it took us about 2 days. We found the problem, fixed it, put it out there, and we never had a problem again with it. What is actually funny about the situation is that literally there was a dozen developers who were in that code and said there's nothing wrong with it. Okay, well, other than it blows up right there. So, literally, we kind of had to rework. We had to find out what was wrong with a lot of things. But literally, ironically, it actually worked really well. What I've also found out is, let me get into some other weirdness. Now, this is going to date this project, I'll tell you right now. But we got a nice new Pentium 60 compact file server that we ran the database off of. It had 16 gigs of RAM, which was a lot actually back then. And for the most part, it ran the business. And what we did is we'd run bill of material. So we'd run an entire rectifier with like almost 100,000 parts. When we used to run on the mainframe, it would take, remember they're time-shared mainframes, so it would take about 2.5 hours. So we thought really something was horribly wrong. We ran it locally, and it ran in 20 minutes. So we kind of, sweating at the bottom of our hands, we walked over to the engineering. We handed him the bill of material. He goes, can you please look at it, please? And we're ready to hear that it's all screwed up. He goes, no, it's all right, it's good. How can it be good? 20 minutes. It didn't take 2 hours. And then it's when you realize how, you're really using really old resources. And I said, a Pentium 60 was not a real fast machine. I can just imagine the craziness you can get with the new hardware that's out here. Oddly enough, what's even crazier is the secretarial pool at Westinghouse, whenever they would get rid of PCs, they would actually get ready to throw them in a dump. And instead, I would go over and say, okay, I need a print server, let me grab them. And I would grab one or two of them before they even threw them out and make print servers out of them and put Linux on them. Good old Red Hat 6 back then. Make a print server out of it, and it would sit there and it would run all day. What's even creepier is they've been running without an IT person pretty much for 10 years, Westinghouse Group. I did get a call about one of the print servers wouldn't work. The print server that prints out purchase orders, I believe. And he was wondering what he should do. And I go, well, what's wrong with it? He goes, well, the power supply burned out. They went and replaced the power supply. How are we supposed to recover from this? And I laughed at him. I said, just turn it on. He goes, are you sure? I turned it on. He turned it on, and literally within 2 minutes, I heard it start printing in the background, like, there's your purchase orders. He goes, wow, that's great. I'm like, it was meant to be hardened. And the file system we used actually was XFS. So if there's any problems, it would have self-recovered when it came back up. But that's just proof that the technology, even back in the 2000s, it didn't run Windows. Most of my stuff. We did run Windows NT4 on the server. Oddly enough, one day I got upset with my boss, and he made a comment about it's not my money. I took it a little wrong, and I cut a purchase order for every computer part that I wanted to upgrade in the company. So I actually updated approximately 12 computers, made them all modern, and updated them to Windows 2000, courtesy of my boss, because it's not his money, is what he said. But ironically, it's funny because even back then, I said, you have to remember the internet, even the internet speeds at that point where you're talking dial-up, 56K at the best. But actually it was like 19.2. And we were one of the first in the area to put 2 modems inside of a computer, and using dual modems, log into your provider to get double the bandwidth. We did that for UPS because UPS, we used to do a lot of UPS software shipping, and actually it would take forever for that to happen without it. Eventually we did get an ISDN line. Eventually, right before I left. But oddly enough, it's pretty funny about it, about the cycles they just keep repeating. And because these businesses refuse to address the problem, they're just going to have another 20 more years of misery because they're not fixing their actual problem. So that's why I said it's not just people, in your own personal life that gets affected by this. It's universal laws across the board. So I thought it was a very interesting story. It's sometimes good to relate it to other things, like whether it be your work, whether it be government, what you have it. There's just cycles everywhere. So, well, what I would do is think about, is there any cycles that you've experienced in your life? Think about it, because there's probably a lot of business cycles you've seen, or a lot of your own personal cycles that you've seen. You see that a lot with people dating too. It's people will date the same type over and over and over again. It's like, oh, why did I date this? It's your type. So, regardless, it popped in my mind today because I saw a video about how there's a cobalt shortage, and I'm like, there's always a cobalt shortage because no one wants to pay any money. I'll guarantee if you wanted to spend $150,000 and you put an ad out there for $150,000, you actually hired someone for $150,000, your problems would be fixed soon. That's because you only want to pay this amount of money. Junior developers actually get paid $60,000. So when you buy a COBOL program for $60,000, you're actually buying someone else's junior developer. And it's the fact that someone worked there for 20 years, I can see that too, because I only worked 10 years in COBOL, and I really didn't want to see it again. But just imagine 20 years. I think I'd be ticked off too. So, I understand why people are leaving. Back in the day when I got into it, during the Y2K thing, and people were coming out of retirement and they were getting what they were asking. Mind you, they were asking $70,000, $80,000, and they were getting it because there was a shortage. So there's still a shortage now, but it's a shortage they claim that they're having. But I think it's a shortage of people who are willing to work for their pay. That's what I think. But what do I know? I'm only a dumb developer. But I know this: I would not work for $60,000. And I would definitely not spend 20 years working on a platform that doesn't really want to go anywhere. And that's usually what the problem is they got this mindset that we bought an asset for $2 million 20 years ago, and we're going to keep, actually 30 or 40 years ago, we're going to keep throwing money in the rat hole until it works. Like, you better have a backup plan, dude. It's just not going to happen. And usually their backup plan is, I'm going to go buy another piece of software that does all my work. But they go to buy it and they find out, oh, why is it $20 million? Well, it's a custom piece of software. Because nothing you do is standardized. Nothing in a bank is standardized. Nothing anywhere in business is standardized anymore. It's not like any of these people follow ISOs anymore. But anyway, I just thought I'd bring that to your attention. But think about what cycles are in your life, whether it be business or, do you keep buying the same car over and over again? Maybe time for a change. Thank you and have a great day.